for real. I think this is like the fourth attempt that I've had. All right, just ignore all this. Just ignore all this. I just didn't want to launch late. All right, I'm gonna hop in the Discord. Oh, I see people waiting. I see people waiting. Thank goodness. All right, everybody. I'm gonna stream into here too. We'll see if this fucks everything up. I mean, it's been a rocky road for me to try to get this up and running. It shouldn't have been. It should be dead easy, but I made it hard. But we're here. I'm gonna let people filter in for just a second. I'm gonna mute myself while I blow my nose. All right, all right. Okay. I see some people who are waiting for crits inside of the waiting room. I am going to pull some. Some of you have had your shit selected, so I'm going to pull you up. Let's start with Dustin. The other Dustin. Hey, Dustbot. You are muted, right? I'm not
I
hearing
was
you
just
right
a little surprised, and I was just tuning in.
now. All right, great. Hey, man, how's it going?
Going pretty good, all right. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Trying to figure out this little change to our format here, but I think my internet has been fully fixed at this point. So
Oh, awesome! Congratulations.
I'm streaming live. I'm streaming to. You can see my screen over here in the Discord, and it's going out live to both Twitch and YouTube. And it looks like our signal is strong. If any of you guys in the chat want to let me know how it sounds, how it looks.
Looks good on the Twitch side, which is where I'm at.
Great, fantastic. So, tell me a little bit about your work this week.
When you put up the prompt, I really had this image of something that has no feet but leaves footsteps, but it's kind of this towering pillar of ash, loosely skinned over some very heated metal. So I imagined this lumbering, living factory in a way, leaving these ashen footprints as it strides through a very Souls-esque landscape. And that fisheye lens was kind of a very experimental sort of thing for me. It's really outside my normal scope of experience, but I wanted to give it a shot anyways because that's what I felt worked best for the overall composition, to capture the giant figure and be able to see the footprints on the ground.
Yeah, it's really ambitious. It's really cool. What would you like help with?
I really, the part that I found myself struggling in is finding the finish.
Uh-huh.
I'm pretty happy with the overall brushiness, but it feels like I'm just lacking somewhere that I can't quite put my finger on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one's tough because there is not a definite answer that I can say like you should definitely do this differently. There are a number of things that I would do differently, but I mean I know that's how crits normally go, is that like the expert sits on stage and says, here's what painting you should have made.
Right.
And I like to avoid that wherever possible. I think, let's see, on the subject of polish, it's like I often find myself wanting to do too much when it comes to adding polish everywhere. And so I'm always in favor of leaving areas of rest and big, sketchier zones. But they need to correspond to like how the viewer reads the piece. And I think one of the things that we're running into here is that we have a lot of, the brushiness. It's like we're getting it in places where I feel like maybe we shouldn't, and then we're getting tighter strokes in places that feel like should be looser. That like the
Okay.
balance of it is off. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Um, when I think about brushiness, I think about like it's not a matter of things just being loose because I love brushiness, and but like every time I see really people who have like really great brushy artwork, it's not just brushy all over. There's this mixture of hard and soft edges, and it feels like every hard edge or soft edge is being done with some intent in mind to like
Mm.
highlight an edge that is supposed to capture the essence of a shape, of a form, and then the places where it doesn't matter so much, they allow their brushwork to go a lot looser. And when I'm looking at the landscape here, we have this like really like long distance that we're trying to cover here. And it doesn't feel like we're able to get like the sense of scale exactly right because we don't have a lot to judge what like the connection between the foreground and the background. Like we know
Okay.
that this is like one dude tall, right? So we can tell that this footprint is like really, really huge by comparison. But then once we get after this point, the only thing that's really tying the foreground to the background is this like one strip of road that is going straight in a way that like when you start to get a distance away from the view from like the where the viewer's stance is, we like every like even interval of distance starts to get really, really compressed really quickly. And I don't feel like we're getting that from this middle ground here.
Okay.
Typically, one of the things that you'll see people do is paths tend to meander just a little bit. And when they meander a little bit over a long distance, they tend to snake like a lot. And so this is a really, really common trope, visual trope, is to snake a path in a way that helps sell that distance. Especially like if we snake it back and forth like 3 times, that means that like this castle is like not that far away from us. So what we need to do is show that it's like still fairly big as at this distance here, and then try to shrink it as much as possible. We don't get a lot of context between the foreground and the background. And we're thrown off by a couple different elements here. One of them is these mountains that seem like they're based off of their values, feel like they're, and the way that the slope runs off here, they look like they're kind of in front of the castle. So these have got to be really, really tiny mountains if they're like shorter than the castle here.
Yeah, that was something I was struggling with. The fisheye element was trying to push that element into the edge, make it work with the perspective,
Yeah.
but also move back in the appropriate environmental perspective. And I think that just didn't work
Yeah. The other
correctly.
element is the smoke. You have like the smoke trails that are like connecting here, but we don't see a really dramatic change in scale between them. So it places this leg as being like, maybe if we were to cast a shadow on it, like maybe right here, like right in front of where the foot is. And yet it's stepping behind this castle, it's in the distance. So we have this jitter where it's like, should it be standing right here and like is just in the middle ground, or is it stepping all the way over into the background? Like the scale of this is not really reading because it's like the leg here is going in front of the castle, but then I presume that the other leg is sort of stepping behind the castle.
Well, I think the other leg just isn't reading quite correctly because it is stepping in front of the closest portion of the castle
Oh, I
that's
see. It's this
nearest
here.
us. As it's that other glowing piece down
Oh,
there
okay.
that kind of becomes part of the sky, I think.
Yeah, I see. Because then it's lighter. It's getting more atmosphere than the stuff behind it.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and so like the atmospheric perspective you have here is pushing it further back, if it's like in line with this, it's a similar color, and if it's got a similar amount of atmosphere, it should probably be a similar value. So I sort of ignored your original question about like the brushiness of it, like the
sure.
finish of it, because I think that like when you have functional issues like this, it becomes very difficult to determine how tight should this edge on this path be. If the path is proportioned wrong to the background, then the question of how tight of an edge should it have is impossible to answer. Because if it's too close and too far away simultaneously, it becomes difficult to make distinct choices about how tight it should be. If it gets repositioned and rescaled so that it matches the perspective better, then we can start making choices about like maybe like losing some edges in some parts and tighten them in others to show like a overlap, to be like, well, this is going to overlap a little bit, and so that overlap's going to get a nice tight edge, but then as it fades out behind it, that'll loosen up. It's like a lot of these choices about finish become impossible to resolve when there's other underlying core technical issues.
That makes total sense.
This is a really, really common problem that I see with people who are struggling to finish a piece, and it feels like they're 80% of the way there, but they're like can't figure out what the final details are, and they want to detail it, and they're like, what do I do? How do I detail this? And it's like, it's not that you're stuck on this step. The feeling of being stuck is often a mistake that happened on a previous step. And not resolving, when you have like your issues resolved, then the next steps often become clear and obvious. When you don't see a path forward, it's something that happened in the past, usually, that is screwing with you. So
that definitely makes sense, because I have been kind of fighting with this for a while.
Yeah.
Like a lot longer than I would normally spend on these. I probably dumped almost 20 hours into this.
Okay, wow, yeah. And then, the other thing is like we have a lot of smoke effects and clouds throughout this piece. And I love smoke effects and clouds, so I have lots of opinions here. I think that you have a really like unified texture for all of your smoke in the foreground and all the clouds in the background and the smoke coming off of this guy. And what I'd like to see is unique character for each of the different types of clouds that we're doing. So if there's going to be, I would try to find some photographs that act as like, this is where I definitely pull in some reference, because you can find a reference that is like, yes, that is the exact type of clouds that I'm looking for. Not just the best looking clouds, but the one that matches your intention for the clouds, and use that as like a touchstone that allows you to cheat off of it and like make a really distinct choice. Like in this case, this may be not what you're going for, but I'm going for these like puffier clouds here and trying to make a shape language that is just more rounded and puffy. And then with the smoke curls here, we might be seeing something that has like that. It's got a more linear shape, but it's got these like distinct lumps to it, and more contrast.
I was originally going to do these in an effect that's like the ash cloud coming off of a volcano.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. And then for the wisps up front, I think I love seeing these kind of like looser sorts of trails with like the little webbing between them. Like when you see a candle that's just been snuffed out. Like I love those kinds of smoke trails. I'll like make any excuse to try to include something like that. And so I think that you could, if you're going to have all these different types of smoke, it's not a matter of like polishing them. It's a matter of making distinct choices about what the shapes need to be. And like when you have a distinct direction on what the correct like shape language needs to be for these things, then polishing them becomes a matter of like achieving those visual goals, and not so much about an abstract sense of polish, but a specific intent on what you want to see in those features.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, especially with a lot of that sensation of just that abrasive grating against uh, where I felt like I was just butting my head against the whole project
Mm-hmm.
early on, and just not having the right choices made, as it were, like to get where I wanted to be.
Yeah. And I mean, if you want to take that same philosophy to some of these other elements, like if you were to, right now, you don't have a really distinct character for the ground plane, right?
Mhm.
And so picking a more distinct character for the ground plane to say, like, okay, this is going to be the texture of like the kind of rock or the kind of sand or whatever that I'm going to be uh, doing here, you then are not asking yourself like, well, what needs to be more finished about it? It's like what makes it feel more like the character of what I intend it to be. And the same thing with like the dust. I see you are starting to get this sort of dust flowing over a flat surface thing that I think is very cool. And then if you were like exaggerate and push that even more forwards and bring out the character of that choice, the more you do, it's less about finish in the abstract. I don't
Mhm.
like the idea of things being more finished. I want to ask a deeper question, like more what? Are they supposed to be more gritty, sandy? Is it supposed to be more flowing sand over rock? Like what is the character? What's the personality? What's the texture that we're trying to achieve? And then it needs to
Okay.
be more of whatever that is. And then finish is just a matter of like, have I achieved all these goals that I intended? If the answer is yes, it means you're done. If the answer is no, um, because you don't know what it should look like, then you need to stop, make choices, find references to like achieve those goals, and then you can like the path forwards begins to reveal itself a little bit more.
I think that's one of the best statements anyone's ever given me in my art education and career,
It's an old
towards like
chestnut for me, and it
finding
took
a
me a while
finish.
to get there,
So
but I'm
that's
glad we
awesome.
got it.
Yeah, that's great. That's super helpful, and like some of the best
it
advice I've ever heard.
this is in this case specific to like the visual elements that are in this. But I've this is a piece of advice I give quite a bit to students who are trying to make like a cool picture. I say don't try to make anything cool. I often am trying to express this idea in terms of like the creative intent. Like if this is supposed to be awe-inspiring or cute or scary or what or giving a sense of adventure, like having a specific goal for like what the creative intent of a piece is so much more important than trying to make it cool. And that like gives you an end point. It gives you a direction. It's like creating a compass for yourself. And it's so critical to do every single time with every single painting because otherwise it becomes impossible to determine whether or not the painting's achieving its goals. We're never going to like achieve coolness in the abstract for ourselves. It's like tickling yourself. It's just not going to work. So picking those goals and understanding what you mean to achieve with it, and then measuring all of your progress against those goals. That's to me like the whole process. That's the game we're playing.
Fantastic.
Great. Well, thanks for playing along with me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the advice as always, and yeah, I'll always appreciate getting the feedback.
All right, great. Well, I'm going to move on. Thanks for joining me.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Horacek was asking, so what was the problem with the stream? It was Comcast. Comcast, like, absolutely screwed me over. So I'm going to drop Dustin back to the waiting room here. I'm going to pull Abarth up. Hey, Abarth. Now, there's a bit of a lag here. Whoop, wait a minute. Hey, Abarth.
Hello.
There's a bit of a lag here, so I think anytime I pull anybody up on stage, they're like spontaneously going to just like appear.
Yeah, sorry, it was a little surprising. I was watching the stream.
Yeah, yeah. Next step is to figure out if there's a way to reduce the lag a little bit. But the internet connection is now working great. Yeah. Apophis is saying it's so unlike an ISP. Yeah, there was a tree that like fell on some wires like down on my block and back in October, and they got it fixed yesterday. It's fantastic. I've been paying for fast internet this whole time. I just started getting it.
We had a squirrel eat our fiber line a couple weeks ago, and I don't know, the guy came in and rewired it and everything was great afterwards. So hopefully it keeps going well for you.
Yeah, they're burying all the cables in my neighborhood, so that trees don't fall into them during hurricanes. Because I'm down here in Florida, and it's exciting. We're gonna have brand new wires for the whole neighborhood. Anyways, tell me a little bit about your work this week.
Yeah, so I was brainstorming about what did Footsteps of Ash like mean for me, like how to form a personal connection with that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about different interpretations of the word ash, and I thought of the ash trees,
Mm-hmm.
the trees in my neighborhood. And then I was thinking about footsteps, and I was thinking about, well, when I walk my son to school, he does this funny thing where he doesn't want to walk on the sidewalk. He wants to walk on the roots of the trees.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just more fun for him. So I thought, oh, then he's leaving his footsteps on ash. And so that might be a cool concept to explore this week.
Any
And so
way you want
I
to take it is fine by me. The prompts are here as a vehicle to like give people some inspiration and direction. I know you're pretty new to working from imagination. You mentioned in your description that you had you were using quite a bit of your own photo reference for this piece, which is great. Um, I'm curious about like what you might want help with.
um, Yeah, I mean, I was a little unsure. I never done like a photo shoot before or a photo reference, like gather my own reference at all. So I know other people maybe like plan it out with like sketches or something. I just basically went on a walk with my son and took a bunch of pictures of him walking on the things, and I looked through in Lightroom and tried to figure out which ones I wanted to use. And I wasn't sure if that was a good way of approaching it or if there's a better way or.
The reality is that every artist approaches the same problems in different orders. And so the way that you're trying to do it now is one potentially viable way among many. And the way that's going to be the best is the one that works the best for you, which is going to be a matter of like, maintaining a level of openness and experimentation and trying, hey, should I start with a sketch first and then shoot reference for it? Should I try to make a photo montage? Like, should I make you can clip together a bunch of photos together and make like a kind of photo collage to create a composition, and then build a drawing from that, and then build a painting from that drawing. There's any way that you can imagine chopping up the order of operations is likely a way that a professional artist does it. My experience talking to other artists about their process is that like every conceivable like arrangement is somebody's method of doing it, and so like I try to encourage people to be as experimental about this as they can, in order to find like something that just clicks with them. So if you feel like there are shortcomings to what you got out of the way that you did things, or they felt cumbersome or annoying, mix it up. If there were things about it that you felt like made this whole process easier for you, pin that down and see what you need to arrange around it. It's really up to you. On the
Yep.
painting side of things, where
Mhm.
did you find you're having a difficult time, easy time?
I mean, I really wanted the focus of the painting to be on the footsteps because that was
Mhm.
the prompt. And some of it is I just didn't have enough time to get to that point. But I feel like that's when I look at this painting, that's not where my focus is drawn. My focus is drawn to the character and even to the like upper half of the character.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure that's because I just spent more time trying to get that a part of the painting to
It's
look right.
clearly where your attention is as an artist, and I think that's fine to do.
Okay.
I wouldn't suppress that instinct.
Okay. Because it felt like when I was like originally thinking of what I wanted to do, it was different than how it turned out.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't sure like how
That is
what that
so
meant.
super normal. That's insanely normal.
Okay.
Yeah. Having a give and take with a piece of work where you have an idea of like what it's going to be, and then you start putting it together, and then you like sort of figure out what it wants, and like trying to meet it halfway, or like see what interesting things start happening as you start making something. That is the creative process as described by just about every discipline I've ever heard described. Like if you listen to music, like you listen to like David Bowie, like talk about writing music, he'll talk about this too. Like it's just that's just it. I mean, you're experiencing the creative process.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. That's reassuring, I guess. It felt it felt sort of like a tug of war, I guess, when I was working on it, because I
Yeah.
kept thinking I wanted this, but I kept getting pulled onto that, and
Yeah.
I eventually gave in and just said, okay, fine, I guess we're gonna
when,
gonna do
when
what I get pulled
people
to.
talk about having a muse, I mean, it's like it's this idea that like there's another force acting on the work besides you, and that you're in conversation with it. Um, and so, I mean, that sounds like what you're describing.
Yeah, it didn't feel like a conversation. I mean, but yeah, it was it felt like a pull, like I was being pulled over here, as opposed to like I didn't hear like a voice or like there were no
No, no,
words
not
to the
not a
conversation.
literal voice. I mean, it's in conversation like through the medium. Like you just feel like the work's getting pulled a certain way visually, and then you, that's just like what the work is doing. Like, and then you have your own ideas, and like it's a back and forth process.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure because we're talking about like drawing for imagination and being more creative this year,
Hmm.
and I wasn't sure like how many of the choices like I was getting to make versus let's say the camera was making when I was taking the picture, or how much like my intention was getting lost through this process. But if you're saying this is sort of the normal expected way of doing things, I guess I'm
The
less
the
concerned.
fact that you were aware that that was happening is very encouraging to me because it's like there are some people that don't realize they just see that as like a mistake and they like do everything they can to stamp it out. And then there's some people who like can't maintain their own like sense of creative direction and just like do whatever and they're like, this is my inspiration. There's like I think that the best work comes when there is a back and forth and being aware of it is really important. Um, and so like I think that a lot of the stuff that's in the frame right now, feel like I can see where you are interested in certain parts of the subject, and the influence of the reference, and it's all showing through. There's more technical stuff you can do to kind of like build on what's already happening here, um, and like I think that you're going to find that like the visually like this work wants some things to happen, and you're going to have some opinions about exactly how you're going to do that, and like I think that just being aware of that back and forth every single time is going to be really important, and like the more you do it the more you're going to come to some balance with it. But if you're already noticing it, like just like maintain awareness of that, and then um, you know as far as like the what to do differently, I mean, I think that there is you're doing some really interesting stuff with this painting, um, that I really like. I think that the focus, that you have a composition going here where you have this frame that's like slightly obscured by the tree to be able to like, give a sense of space and direction to your subject that I think is working quite well. You are also your subject is the only thing in here that's using these like red and orange colors, which is giving a really clear sense of focus, and that is combined with your very careful rendering that you're doing on the jacket, and all of that is combining like really well. The thing that's fighting it is the amount of contrast that we're seeing in the background. I think this is probably something that's happening in your photography where you have these really bright whites against these darker shadows. I think if you were to go back, not having seen it, my guess is that it's probably not as intense as this if we were to analyze the pixels a little more closely. I mean, it is a daylight photo, right? But I think that in order to give a better sense of the space and to like better like leave room for our subject, we would probably want to lower the contrast down on some of these background elements. So I'm just taking some of the colors from here and lightly washing them over the places where we're going to really extreme white. I tend to want to reserve pure bright white for like really, really extreme highlights that are intended to direct the attention of the viewer really strongly. Having them happen on lots of like striped elements like this is going to, I think, take away from the overall experience.
Yeah, I noticed this when I was doing when I in the value stage. I noticed that the character wasn't standing up off the background very much in the values.
You can lean on, as a painter, you can lean on that contrast as much as you want. You can go to really extremes to push back, like muting the color of the sky and like really like deadening a lot of the highlights wherever you feel like. And then, you can find reference that would justify it. You don't need to go exactly by the photo reference. Anything that's in the photo reference that serves your goal of building the piece that you want is good. And then everything that you don't like about it, you have license to change. So if you ever want to like readjust all of the contrast in the entire image to suit your needs, like go for it. Same thing with the tree here. We're getting this really big block of light over here that is, really high contrast with the shadow. So we're getting this like, there's a lot of attention being brought over to this area, and there's not a lot of texture here. And you don't seem to have a lot of interest in this part of the painting. So we definitely want to bring down the contrast on this part. And then we can also add additional interest here if we wanted to. I really like the way that there's a lot of shadows in this scene. You could add more shadows, like cast shadows from other tree branches. If you have other reference photos that have like tree branches casting shadows over the trunk of a tree, you can use those combined with this to like add additional interest inside this scene, right? So there's a lot of freedoms here that you can exercise. Beyond that, you can also continue to play with the colors a little more if you want to. A gradient map is a little odd, but one of the easiest ways to unify a color palette is with something like a photo filter. Photo filter is just going to have you pick a color that gets overlaid over the top of the entire painting. So you can, cool it or warm it, and it's just going to pull all of the colors slightly more in line with each other. And you can control like how extreme that gets. And it's going to help you feel like you're creating a color palette without having to go through a lot of color theory.
Mm. Yeah, because I just basically color picked a lot of these colors, and so it makes sense that they didn't end up in any kind of sort of unified scheme.
Yeah, but I think that the way that you have this bright highlight color here starts to put you on a path where you are using color as an asset for this painting, and then this is just intended to bring that tighten up that the palette just a little bit, so that you have like something that feels more unified overall. You don't really
Would you like mask out the character a little bit in this to sort of make him stand up off the background, or would you want to unify the whole palette?
I'm trying to unify the whole palette, and then you can do other stuff to bring him forward. It's like the values on the jacket are pretty like close to the middle, just because like that's where when you have like a bright orange color, like it tends to like pull away from both light and dark towards a mid-tone, because the bright local colors tend to like pull up any shadows and pull down any highlights. So you can add to this a little bit by just like pushing that upwards even further, exaggerating it. I might even use like a blending mode here, like hard light, to if you felt like you wanted to create a little, you didn't want to necessarily color pick your whole way through it, picking a brighter color here, and you can start to glaze a little bit of that over, and you can see how instead of getting this more washed out white, it's going to maintain a lot of the saturation if you want to maintain saturation while brightening something. I find hard light is easier than trying to color pick your way through it, because there's a lot of traps where you can accidentally deaden the color down in a way that's not appealing.
That makes sense.
All right. Any other questions I can help you with?
No, thank you so much, Pete.
Thanks, Edworth. Great work. All right. Sifric here? I don't see Sifric in the chat. Nanoboy. Nanoboy's here. Let me pull Nanoboy up. Nanoboy, you've been selected. Hey, how's it going? This whole lag thing is I know it's throwing everybody off. Are you there? I heard some mic rustling for
Uh,
just a moment. Hello, Nanaboy. Can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. How you doing?
Uh, Good. Hold on. I need to mute the stream audio for a second. Can you still hear me?
Your mic's coming through weird. You say you mute in the stream? Yeah, you probably want to mute the stream.
Yes. I think I've got. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, you probably just want to. You can just probably just pause the stream. I have the screen share running here in the live broadcast channel.
Okay. I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great. So you got this. You had a photo from the Fire Festival in Japan. You said as a inspiration for this piece.
Yeah, I mean, this was kind of like almost half study and half imaginative.
Mhm.
Obviously, the hands are not real, but the basic shape of the fire is kind of like a woman.
Mhm.
Was something that I captured at the event. I really wanted to turn that into something. Um, so I actually did an entire different sketch before settling on this idea. But then uh, I ended up going with this route and adding the person and extra details to kind of make it a little bit more, I guess, fantastical.
Mhm. So I wanted to use this as an example of painting fire, because painting fire is just one of those things, right? Uh, how was your
Yes.
experience painting fire from reference?
So I think my approach was basically I did everything in black and white just to try to make sure that the values read, and then I have a gradient map that it's the first time I've actually used it. I kind of just made a couple.
Uh-huh.
I think it got the colors to look at least the way that the picture kind of also rendered them, so it looks pretty close. I guess like yeah, tone wise to the picture.
Mhm.
Um, but it's very hard because I basically ended up having to kind of go in with low flow, um, maybe even low opacity, just to try to create little uh, tiny variations in the value because they're in the picture of the fire. There'd be just some parts that had a really hot spot,
Uh-huh.
and then the rest of it was actually way more of the darker red.
Yeah. Fire is tricky because it doesn't really behave like a lot of other materials. And so I find that learning to paint it is kind of its own unique challenge. Um, one of the things that's weird about it is that it tends to get more, it's you think about like it tends to get more complex and more saturated as it moves away from like this bright core. In this case, you're using a photograph where like the exposure is blowing out a lot of the interior of the fire, but then as it starts to move away from that, we get these like brighter red and orange shapes, and it's all translucent, which makes it tough to figure out what parts are going to be the bright parts and what parts are going to be like the more red ones, right? Um, because it's not like we can just figure out like the lighting direction. There is no lighting direction of the fire. It's fully emissive. It's creating its own light. And I noticed that you're using, you're using a fairly simple brush here. You're using it similar to like my brush, right?
Yes. Yep.
I think that's good. You've got the opacity down really low on it, and you're smudging it out to make it kind of soft. But I think that the trick for fire is that it's actually really hard edged. Any
Yeah.
individual lick of flame has like a really distinct boundary to it. And what it is it's kind of like this web of curving strands, right? That are very thin, And then there's this like film that goes between them. So the way that I paint fire in shorthand is to first find the strands, and in some cases towards like at the brighter parts, we get these like orange and yellow strands. And I'm going to do this at a pretty high opacity because it's fairly opaque. So you get these like wiggling strands, and then the space between them as it becomes more transparent becomes more orange. And so they get filled in like that, and then you can add an additional layer of complexity by taking a darker, more saturated red and make parts of those even more transparent. And you can layer these on top of each other, where it's a matter of making these individual strands and making them wiggle around in like interesting patterns, and then kind of connecting the interior of them. And if you ever feel like you want to make the fire look a little bit more interesting, you can take like your darker color here and start to like work away at the interior brighter part to build these from the inside out. We want to make sure that the boundaries of the flame have these, like, even as it gets really light, even at the like fringes of it, you can see in this reference, instead of it going soft, it maintains the same level of like, it maintains the same sharpness. It just becomes very, very transparent. So it's like there's these lighter wisps that come to the outside of it. And so I think that the key to it is really like finding all of these little strands and wisps and like creating like, depending on like how tightly you pack them together is going to determine the size of the fire. Like a really big fire is going to be lots of really, really tiny strands that are like tightly packed, and like a small fire is going to be like a few really big strands. And so they have kind of a fixed scale. So like how tightly you pack these together is going to give you a sense of the size. And then from there, like, because there's no orientation that's right or wrong, it's just like a texture or a pattern, you can shape that into literally anything that you want, just like you've done with the, forming hands, forming a head. You can form this kind of thing into any shape you want. In this reference, we almost seem to have a little bit of like a dragon head at the top here, where there's like an eye and there's like a mouth with like jagged teeth. You can draw any shape you want, just as long as you get it the right texture, and you can make it into any kind of figure. And so if you wanted to, you could even have like, if the top of the flame, right now you have this like bright part that's kind of floating above it. If you were to bring this all down a lot, you could have some room to be able to make like details for a head and details for hair. And it would feel pretty natural because it's moving away from the hotter core at the center of the fire. I love these kind of like organic abstract patterns, the way that they like, you're just trying to like once you get like the sense of the texture locked in, then you can just make them into whatever suits the need of your composition. And so you can use that to like make a shape, make a flow. Like if you wanted to have this feel like a big, like show like a big upward motion, you can have this take whatever kind of flow or shape you want, just like forming cloth for an outfit. And it all will look more or less right as long as you get the underlying texture of it correct. Do you have any questions about it? Oh, he's not here anymore. Nanoboy ended up going back into the audience. Okay, great. Thanks, Nanoboy. It's a really cool piece. Thank you for spending time working on this. I hope this worked out. It seemed like we had some technical issues with the stream going here. All right. Who do we want to bring up next? I think Cosm's in the audience. Bring Cosm up. Hey, Cosm. Cosm, are you there? You muting the stream?
Hello there.
Hi there.
Hi. Sorry if the mic is a bit shaky. I tried to use the phone, so
You're
yeah.
coming through great.
Thank you.
All right. Tell me a little bit about your work this week.
So first I was trying to like create this. When I heard first Footsteps of Ash, I was trying to create this ballerina that twist, kind of create flames, but I really wanted to go a bit abstract. I love to go a bit surreal with my works, so I just, had this idea of this monument like in Elden Ring that just moves and you encounter it and you don't know what it is and you don't know what's the purpose of it. It just walks and wanders. And I wanted to create something like that. So the idea was like this moving monument that has some building on it and it has a story that is linked to certain individuals. And I took elements of Footsteps and Ash, like Ash is embers, embers and fire could resemble like vengeance, or like Ash is like remains and death. So I tried to take those elements and infuse them into my artwork, and it turned out into this entity, and I really love it.
I like it too. I think it's a really cool design. In your description, you were saying that you were struggling to get the color palette to feel like the way that you want. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. So whenever I have a collection of artists that I follow that have this distinct look to their artwork, and you are among them because like the artwork that you have even in your profile picture have that desaturated look that I love so much because it gives like this gritty nature to like dark fantasy artworks. And I really want to recreate it, but I don't know how because I'm really new to adding colors to my pieces. So if you could give me any input or anything that I could, add to my studies, I can work on so I can achieve this kind of desaturated look, yet it still looks good.
I think that the word you might be looking for is monochrome, which is a specific technical term, meaning that like a lot of the colors are sort of revolving around a single key color. When the reason why you're not getting that monochrome feel here is not just because we have red, yellow, green, and then gray all in the same scene. I think this is a very cool color palette, actually. I think it's a very effective color palette. But if you're looking for something that feels more monochrome, I have very similar advice for you that I had for Abarth, which is you need to twist the whole thing towards a particular key color. And so something like a really strong photo filter will start to bring whatever that key color is into everything. So adding more yellow into your red, adding more yellow into your gray, adding more yellow into your green would help with that. The way I achieve the look that I think you're looking for is I often talk about using gradient maps in my work, and part of what they do for me is they apply a certain number of colors across the entire scene simultaneously. And so whether there's other colors involved or not, when we're doing something like this, I'm gonna bring the saturation down on your local colors here, because the main thing is that you're letting a lot of your local colors shine through. Here we go. I think this is what we're looking for, right? It's not just that we're going to turn the saturation down. It's that we're going to like color grade the whole scene also. So right now you're relying on like yellow's looking like yellow, red's looking like red, green's looking like green. But in a cinematic environment, whether it's in a video game like Elden Ring or in a movie or in my paintings, there's a certain amount of color grading that's happening that is affecting the overall colors for the whole scene simultaneously. they do these kinds of like screen effects and shaders in a lot of games to help unify the overall palette of an entire scene. And it ends up collaborating to some degree with the local colors of whatever the objects are. And so, you could go from, I've done paintings where it's literally no local colors at all, and there's just like a color grading that goes over the top. That's like really, really washed out, like zero color. It's in the middle of the night under moonlight, and there's no local colors, but you can still make out shapes. That's a totally viable way to do it for some pieces. But I think that you have these particular colors picked out, and I think they look very good. So some balance between some local colors and then some color grading, either from a gradient map or a photo filter or a color balance layer, where you can pick what you want the overall color vibe to be, and then you can tint all of your local colors to be a little bit more of whatever it is. And then what I'll typically do from there is now that I have these, I'll sample them from the scene and I'll use them around in different places inside the scene. So once I have this like version of green, this version of yellow, this version of red, then I can use it for like, if I wanted to add lighting to the top of this, to this rooftop here, I'm going to just be sampling from within the scene so that I get a consistent color palette throughout that's going to have this like same unified feeling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. Like it's like magic when you do it. Like when I try to do it,
I
I
think
keep
you can do
struggling.
this.
But like that's so awesome.
I-
Like the moment you added that gradient, it just like, oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And so like there's a lot of different ways to do it. Like this is really a personal thing. There's a lot of different adjustment tools in here. Color balance works. A lot of people like curves. I cannot make sense of curves. I love selective color. I think selective color is a really strong choice. So you can choose like, well, I want my whites to be all cyan, and I want my blacks to be all, all red and with some magenta in them. And then you see we're starting to get this like moody palette, and then you can do all kinds of weird stuff with it, and tune it to be able to make a kind of overall look for your thing, and then you can scale it up and down. You can add blending modes. There's all kinds of weird things. Like with selective color, I like because you can say like, well, the yellows actually, I love how I love them, and I really want to like push them up, or like I specifically want to have less yellow in this scene, and so you can grab color ranges like this and start to affect primarily like I just want my yellows to be more orange, and be able to like pull sliders around instead of having to repaint and like reapply stuff. So I will often be halfway through a piece where I'll be adding color, and I'll be pulling in things like selective color and gradient map, and pulling my sliders around to experiment and see a lot of options, because like figuring out the vibe for a color palette is sometimes you can do it scientifically, but I like to do it experimentally as a digital artist. And
Yeah, me too. Like I just experiment and see.
yeah, and then you like the gradient. If you really like the look of the way the gradient map was like screwing with everything here, especially with like the saturation on like the local colors turned down, if we get a nice balance there, then it's just a matter of making a layer above it and then beginning to work on top of it, and you'll be able to start to pull all that together. There's really not a like. I don't think you need to like have a formula for these things. I really think you can be intuitive about it and be playful, and you're going to find your way to it. It's just a matter of like really embracing the tools that allow you to like adjust the whole scene along with your more local color choices. Finding a balance between those two is going to be a piece by piece sort of thing. So if you find a solution that really works, you can come back and reuse those tools again in a later piece, but you might find they're not working. It just means that you need to like keep looking for a nice balance, a nice solution for whatever you're doing, and then keep tweaking it until it feels like what you want it to feel like. Because I'm confident that if you play around with it, you'll be able to get like that feeling that you're looking for each piece. and make it really your own.
I see. That's perfect. Yeah, thank you. Like I'm gonna try like different techniques and see what works for me. And if something works for this piece, like it might not work for the next one. If that's what I understand you're saying, like I
Mm-hmm.
need to try different techniques that might work for different pieces.
Yeah. And like the more that you find successes with different like versions of tweaking the color, the more options you have for when you're feeling lost or stuck. Because I will go all the ones that I showed here. I will use all of these and in different measure depending on like what I'm trying to achieve and like what's been working, or maybe I just am wanting to try a different avenue. There's like um, there's a few that I tend to come back to, but I mean, color is one of those things that everything is so with color, everything's relative, and so finding a way of like adjusting the whole thing where everything relatively works together the way you're looking for. I don't know. It often feels like it takes a lot of like pushing and pulling.
Yeah, understood.
All right.
I have a question if it's okay.
Yeah.
Like it's not related to color, but it's more related to when you're designing. Like how do you know that you're adding too much to the design? Because there are different ideas, and you want to kind of implement them into the design. How do you know that you're adding too much to the design?
I always feel like I never can find room to add enough. I look around at a lot of other designs and I say, oh, there's so many good ideas in this character with like all these different motifs coming together, all these different design elements coming together. And I feel like whenever I try to like add more and more stuff, it always feels like too much and too busy. And so I find myself having to like pare it back and then thinking I'm not doing enough. I think it's a personal and intuitive process to figure out whether or not you're adding too much stuff or not enough stuff, and it comes down to like your taste and your style more than anything. But I don't think you're ever likely to find a situation where you go, I know exactly how much stuff I need to add to this. um, if you feel like things are not complicated enough and you want to add more elements to it, then try to add more. And if you think it looks like too much, too busy, like then start stripping them away. And I don't think that you have a problem with balance of too many different ideas in this piece. I think it's got a lot of ideas in it, and I think they all collectively work together very nicely. Um, what I would like to see is maybe a little bit more balance in terms of like the colors and the values. Like with these rocks being very bright, sticking out of the back, it seems a little strange to me. Um, like just the overall like lighting of it being a little bit more consistent would I think help sell the idea more. Like you have like this square box, but like all of its sides seem to be kind of catching light equally. Um, I'm having a hard time getting a sense of where the lighting direction is on this guy. And then like you have ideas like there's these chords coming down, and I think this is really good, but you only have a few of them and they're all kind of equally spaced. I would love to see like some of them are definitely like, distinct enough to make out the concept, but then having a bunch of them all kind of like too many of them together, like, having them more like tangled up or changing the height and position of them so that there's more variation. Same thing with like the tombstones. Like I like adding the tombstones on the back. You have like 3 of them that are kind of evenly spaced from each other, and they're all the exact same shape. I think that like having some of them be like bigger ones and catching more light, and smaller ones catching less light, and like having them all be their own, giving them each their own character. Like I think you can take all of the ideas that you have here and adding more variation within each of them, rather than like worrying about how many total ideas that you have. Because I think the number of elements you have here is very nice. It's just a matter of like building variation within them. Again, with like the boards on this, I think they're all looking a little odd with the dark lines spaced between them. Grouping some of them, varying the damage throughout, getting the lighting, not so unified across the whole thing, doing all of those little variations within each of these motifs that you're making is going to add a lot. And then to say something nice, I think that like these frames that you have where you have different images in each one, and I noticed you had like 3 of them and they were wrapping around, and you even planned out the third one that you didn't show us. I think that this is a really cool idea, and the way that you've dressed it up with the flowers around the border is very cool. So I think that like some of, I'm going to say that some of these design elements feel more thoroughly fleshed out than others. I really am not concerned at like how much you're doing here. I think it's good. It's a good balance.
Thank you. Like I was really like nervous about adding like all these elements and feeling like it's too much on the design. But yeah, I think I need to shift that focus into like tidying up like the values, as you said, in the building, on in the other elements, and kind of varying the designs of the graves or other shape languages that I have. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much. Like that's a really like valuable advice. I'm gonna try to implement it and see like how is that gonna affect the next artworks. Thank you.
I think the awareness you have over the whether or not there's too much or too little, the fact that you're worrying about that is a good sign. So that means you're just listening. You're listening to your intuition about it. You should, I think, leave it at a place where you're unsure. Is it too much or is it too little? If you're confident it's too much, bring it back. And if you're confident it's too little, add more. But if you find yourself scratching your head and feeling anxious about it, I think you might be in the sweet spot.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
That makes sense. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
No, thank you for participating. All right. So I've got one more piece that I pulled out here, but I don't think that they're with us today. Sifirk dropped a cool dragon piece here. Sifirk says, "Poor knight, you can't always win. Sometimes there's nothing left but the footsteps of your ashes. Fortunately, I won't have time to develop this scene further. Really enjoyed it. By the way, Ash Ketchum's picture under a weekly prompt was excellent." Yes. So I thought this was a really great drawing of a dragon, and I thought the overall concept for the the footsteps of Ash was a interesting one. But I wanted to talk to Sifirk about like lighting and gradients. The thing that I'm not a big fan of in this piece is the way that we have a background that's like pure black, and then we also have a foreground that's pure black. Typically when we have like a colors tend to have like a space within the composition, and really extreme colors often take very extreme positions. So to have like the same extreme color be both like the front and the back is I think a little distracting. Same thing with the smoke, where we have like near white for the smoke for both the smoke coming out of the dragon's nostrils as well as the boots. What I wanted to recommend is finding a way of like adding a little bit more atmosphere to like the background, or finding some different solutions for the foreground. And then I was really curious about adding a little bit of gradation to create a sense of lighting inside this scene to bring our attention to where our interaction is between the dragon and the guy, the melted guy. And without breaking from this like flatter overall look, I don't think you need to break from that too much, but I wonder if a little bit of gradient would be helpful here. And then I noticed that the lighting also, you've got this shadow being cast here, and it comes with this like highlight around the boots, and it feels like we're getting all this light inside the scene from right here that's casting out this way. But I just don't know if this whole foreground element is really working the way that you're intending. I really like the dragon lazily like draping itself over all of the gold here. But I know you didn't have too much time to spend on this, but I think there's got to be a way of staging this foreground that's going to be a little bit more elegant. And I think more simple in the process. I think that the simple interaction here means that there's got to be a simple way of constructing a foreground where the lighting's consistent with the background, that tells the story, and uses the color and contrast inside the scene to really assist it. I don't want to go too deep into painting over, especially with you not here to join us. But I just wanted to mention a little bit of what I was thinking about it, and thank you for participating this week. We're over 5 minutes, but I kind of don't want to end on a note where we have somebody who wasn't here. So if there's anybody who's in the chat who wanted to crit, who is, if you want to like mention in the chat, feel free, and I'll pull your stuff up on the screen. In the meantime, while I wait for this to happen I don't know how to balance the lag that's in here. I don't want to just leave dead air while I wait for somebody to respond. I'm going to like look at the prompts. Let's see, where were these prompts? It's not my prompt list. Oh, wait, I put it in prompts for free class. I've got my prompts for free class here. And I was letting people vote last time, but I think a lot of people that voted didn't do the homework. So I'm not going to let anybody vote, because I'm not going to let have a situation where we're going to be voting on something and then not doing it. So if there's no way to enforce that, I think I'll just pick for you guys. Kit's saying, this is a random question, but how do you set the flow and opacity permanently for your brushes? It's a good question. On Photoshop CS6, I'm not using the brush presets, I'm using tool presets. It is a very astute question that you have here. The tool presets allow you to save opacity and flow so that you don't have to go and set them every single time you pick up the brush. I think that the newer versions of Photoshop do that. But like when they did that, they like got rid of the tool preset tab. I like the tool preset tab because it like has different. If you check this checkbox in the bottom, it to show current tool only, you can have like different brush sets for like eraser versus your brush tool, you know, and so you get to set all the parameters for the brush tip and then bake it into the tool, and then you get a tool preset. And so in my like brush download on Gumroad, I include the tool preset for Photoshop on there. I don't know if it's compatible with CC. I need to do more experiment with it. Photoshop 2015 keeps those settings per brush. Okay, that makes total sense because I had to work around that shortcoming. Lattices in the waiting room says they would like to go. I'll bring Lattice up. It's our final person. Hello, Lattice.
Hello.
All right. I can hear the stream going a little bit in the background. Feel free to mute the stream.
I paused it, so hopefully it's okay now.
Perfect. All right. Yeah, I missed some people's stuff here because I pulled from the homework channel a little early because I got my timing all screwed up today. You did a lot of work on yours this week, so I'm glad to feature it. Oh, it's super high resolution too. Copy. Tell me a little bit about your work this week.
Well, I kind of did the thing where I set out to do one thing and another thing happened. I can drop my sketches in the chat real quick.
Oh yeah, feel free to share your sketches.
I did 5 sketches, just kind of getting the idea down, and then I also dug through my old sketches to kind of get some more kind of designs and textures and stuff like that.
Cool.
And I also figured out a pretty neat trick where I got some tracing paper and I taped it on top of my Wacom Cintiq, and that worked out pretty well.
That's interesting. What I would have done is I would have taken a screen if there was like I saw you doing that on the stairs here.
Mhm.
If you have a drawing of something that you want to overlay, you can just take a phone like shot of it and then set it to multiply and put it on a new layer. I think it's probably easier than putting tracing. I didn't understand why it needs to be tracing paper though, because like if you put paper over your tablet, you should be
It's
able
just more
to.
transparent. I didn't try it with regular paper.
It should work with just regular paper if you just want to like go over those lines again. But I think it'd probably be easier to just take a photo of it and then bring it in as like a scan.
Are my sketches loading for you? They're kind of
Where are you posting them?
the Discord.
Where on the Discord?
I'm on the waiting room.
Okay, yeah, I can find it in there. I just need to know where to look. Oh, they are all big boy, like they are the HEIC files from the phone.
Gotcha. I'll convert those real quick.
Okay.
Quick actions. Convert
I
image.
see. And I've got this one sketch from you here. So, tell me what you want to know about. Tell me what you want help with.
I'm not really sure. I guess I'm just kind of glad I got a piece done. Sometimes it can be
Oh,
hard for me to
Oh
churn
boy,
out
did you get a
work.
piece
So
done. This is an epic piece, and there's a lot going on here. This is huge for a
Um,
week's worth of work.
I don't know. Sorry, I'm trying to
It's
get
okay.
this in the
Um,
chat.
Well, the other question that might spark conversation is like, what did you have an easy time with, and what did you have a hard time with?
I had um, sorry, I'm getting really distracted by let's see, where did I put that? Folder. Ah, the
It's
upload
okay.
went
Let's just
wrong.
talk about the piece that we have in front of us. You've got a lot here.
Gotcha. I kind of just I started with this sketch of I did a sketch at work of kind of like a room because you also said it could be an environment, and for the bug god painting, I kind of the background was pretty flat, so I wanted to do more of an environment that it kind of feels like you can move around in a bit more. And
Uh-huh.
you also said that your favorite part of the bug god painting was the one that the piece that I actually drew traditionally. So I just kind of did more of that.
Okay.
But after I had done the sketch for the room, I kind of just started drawing one day, and I came up with the face. So and then I just kind of tried to mash those together, and this is the result.
Yeah, that
And
came together
I
nicely.
still want to do a lot more on it, but
Yeah, you could render more elements if you wanted to. I mean, there's still room to do more sculpting with the figure, and to add more color if you wanted to. I don't mind that like some of the elements are done in kind of different styles from each other. I think that's a totally fair way to work. You know, it seems like you're still working on this thing, so I don't want to fault you for having bits at different levels of finish. Okay. If I have one major criticism, there's something I wanted to say to everybody. I got less homework in this week, and the ones that did come in are all very, very ambitious. I'm giving you guys like a week and a really loose prompt for these. I don't want everyone who's thinking about participating to feel like they need to do like an epic scene with like a great character and an awesome background and a full like set of world building. This might be too ambitious of a piece for what we're doing here. Feel free to like scope it back to the point where you are confident in what you're making and that like you can finish it and it's not going to like take over your life. This is a weekly drawing exercise where we have the opportunity to talk about stuff. So it's not necessary that you make like the biggest, most epic, most impressive piece ever, because the goal is not like I don't want the goal of this to be to make me happy or to impress me. It's really like I want to be here as a resource for you guys every week, and I want to encourage you to do imaginative drawing all the time. And so anybody in the audience who wants to participate, do not feel like you need to make a piece that is as finished as these or more finished or like bigger in scope. Because if this turns into an arms race where you're all trying to do like the most epic, hugest, most detailed painting every week, it's going to make it hard for people to participate. So I want it to, I love that you're being ambitious about this, but I just want to make sure everybody knows like ambition in like the scope of these things is not the most important aspect to them. The important thing is that like you run into barriers where you're like struggling with something or you have questions about something, and I'm here as a resource to be able to answer those questions. And so coming back to sort of the original point of the conversation, where are you struggling and where would you, where do you feel like you are having a hard time? So maybe I can offer some help to like help you achieve things that you're having a hard time with.
I'm struggling with finishing work. I would like to do conventions. I applied to one not too long ago, but I didn't get in, so I definitely want to have enough work that I would be able to apply again.
Sure.
And I think this has been motivating. So it'd be cool if I could use these prompts to kind of create a series for that.
Yeah, I mean, like this is definitely the sort of thing that you can like finish up and add to your portfolio for trying to take the conventions. Finishing stuff, the conversation I started off with Dustbot about understanding like what it is that you want to make so that you make it more of that as opposed to trying to make it more done is where I see a lot of people getting stuck. It's like getting stuck in finishing pieces often comes down to having unresolved technical issues or like unclear goals. And when you aren't exactly sure where you want to be going with a thing, and like you've made a mistake maybe like with your values or your lighting early on, and then you just think like I just need to make it more done, I need to make it more polished, but like you're not going back and correcting those mistakes, it becomes this like unsolvable problem. It's like because if you have a lighting issue, then you're never going to be able to add detail that's going to make the lighting look right. And you're going to stay stuck in that same way forever, and you're going to keep redoing sections to try to like solve for these problems without ever addressing them head on. So the easiest way to finish stuff is to have a really strong plan for how the piece is going to come together early. Understanding what the color palette is, understanding the gesture and pose of your character, the design of everything that's in the scene, having that all established and like working through a checklist to make sure that you know what all these elements are supposed to be and what you want the overall thing to feel like is deeply critical to like getting it done, because you can't just take like anything and be like, well, I just need to make a more done version of this. Like there is like done is not an attribute, finished is not an attribute that we like need to like strive to achieve. And so like if you right now you have this figure that is partially rendered, I think figuring out like, well, what is the lighting in the scene, what are the colors for this figure, if you can get that done even in a very loose way, then you then know that you just need to figure out surface details and edges. Like once you have like a rough version of the piece that like has all these questions answered, then it's just a matter of like putting hours into it to make sure that you clean up all the finer details and like resolve any like lingering minor issues. And it becomes like almost mechanical to get it done. The process to get there can sometimes be a little challenging, but you know, I feel like you're off to a really strong start with this. I think it's got a cool composition. It feels like you're starting to build a color palette. You have the drawing for the characters really strong. I think you need to answer questions for yourself about what is the final appearance of all these elements going to be, and have that done in a rough way so that you don't find yourself trying to detail something when you don't know what color it is, or like picking a color as you start to, like, you know, you've got these like flowers coming out of the hair here. Trying to figure out what those look like last means that you might have just put a ton of work into like a lot of other elements in this piece, and only to discover that like something you're adding in late like doesn't really jive with what you're doing. Doing a problem solving pass on like the whole thing as early as possible helps prevent this. The order in which you solve all these problems, as I was talking to Abarth about, is a personal one. Every artist I know solves the same problems in a different order. And so figuring out what order works best for you is like a matter of personal exploration. And I don't really have like a set prescription when it comes to that. But when it comes to like, you know, how do you make sure things get done? You need to make sure that you are closing off dead ends. The number one thing that you want to look for when you're figuring out like the lighting on your figure or any aspect of this is like, do I know what's going to happen next? Do I understand how this leads into the next step? Because if you don't know where you're going to take these decisions next, then you run risk of ending up in a dead end that you can't pay your way out of. And that's death. That's like, you're never going to finish it. And you can have pieces that would get stuck and get rebooted for years without ever getting fully finished when you don't know like how they're going to be completed. So your main task for this going forwards is going to be making sure that like you've closed all those dead ends and that you don't ever end up in one. More so than making this the best piece, you need to make sure that it's a piece that you understand what comes next and that you understand how you're going to finish it. Finishing it is one of the very first and most important goals. And then everything else kind of comes second to that, I think.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay. That was a lot of
you.
info. Sorry, I gave you a big dump there. Anything you want me to circle back on really quick before I let everybody go?
Nope, I'm okay. Thank you.
All right, great. Yeah, I really do want as many people who I want to see a lot of people participate in this. You guys do not need to make sure that this is like a super epic, awesome, humongous, like piece that like blows everybody's mind and you outdo yourself. I want you to draw stuff from your imagination and have fun with it and use it as a platform for self-discovery and use it as a platform for conversation. So if you're listening to this and you think you would like to be in the mix on those discussions, don't feel intimidated and don't feel like you need to plan out something that's huge that's going to take over your whole week. Scope it to where you're comfortable. Like we were looking at, whose were we looking at? The Cosm. We're looking at Cosm's piece that was like, you know, a monster design on a gray background. Totally fine. Like, you do not need to do an epic, like, full background piece in order for you to have a discussion with me on this stuff. So next piece, I think what we're going to do is Caretaker of the Stones. I'm just going to grab that one. Caretaker of the Stones is going to be the next prompt. I'm going to give the description in the homework channel. I'm going to link to Discord here in case you're only seeing this on the Twitch or whatever. Feel free to hop in the Huckleberry Discord and come join us. You just need to make something from your imagination that follows the prompt Caretaker of the Stones and post it in the Moorbacher homework channel. Or is it Pete homework channel? Homework Pete under the learning category by next stream, 5 p.m. Eastern, next Thursday. And I'll take a look at your stuff, and I'm going to pull some people up on stage for critique, and I'd love to talk to you. So I'll post the details up in there in the homework channel for this week's prompt. And until next week, have a good one.